good morning, good afternoon, good evening, potentially depending where you are in the world. Welcome to the Purpose Collective. We're just getting started. Great to see some familiar faces, great to see some new faces. As you join, we're just waiting for people to join. Use the chat, tell us who you are, tell us where you are in the world. And today's topical question, just as we get started to introduce ourselves, is I'm reading this great book, How to Lead with Purpose, which is by our guest, Liam Black. And so the question is, what book are you reading at the moment, or what book have you recently read, and would you recommend it? And the other question, if you want to answer a second question, is what book are you going to buy next? And I think I would recommend this one. I think Liam recommends this one as well. Yeah, tell us who you are, tell us where you are in the world, and if you are reading a book or just read a book, tell us what it is and what you liked about it. And we'll just take a minute or two just to see who's with us and to wait for others to join us, and then we'll get started. So let's dive into the chat and see who have we got with us. So we've got Alberto with us. Alberto, what book are you reading?
Well, I'm yes, this one. I didn't start reading it, but this is quite, it was in my list for a while, and it's called Humankind, and I heard very, very good things about this book, and it's from a Dutch guy that is quite inspiring. So I'll let you know in the next sessions how it is.
Yeah, it's a great cover, and we've got a few people now starting to use the chat. So we got Phil, who's reading Andalusia, No Bullshit Leadership by Chris Hurst. Apologise for the swearing, I can't do the asterisks in language. Drop us in the chat and tell us whether it's any good. We've got Rawia, a regular member of the Purpose Collective in The Hague. Great to have you with us again, Rawia. We've got Sarah down in Winchester. Great to see you, Sarah. So as you join, use the chat, tell us who you are, tell us where you are in the world, and tell us if you're reading a book or recently read a book that you'd recommend. What is it, and would you recommend it? So we have Josh, good morning from, I can't pronounce it, but in the Netherlands. And Josh, you were with us probably about almost a year ago on the beach in The Hague, so great to see you again. We've got Paula from Fife in Scotland. Phil said it's like the Cliff Notes of leadership. Sounds interesting. We've got Tabitha in Sweden. Nice to have you with us. Tabitha, we've got Esther in London, who's recently read Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. I've not read that one, obviously. Patrick Lencioni's got lots of good stuff out there. We've got Leela in Bath recommending Food for Life. Rawia says she normally reads several books at a time, like one at the moment that helps to clarify boundaries and tips. Okay, so if you haven't used the chat, tell us who you are, tell us where you are in the world. It's going to be quite an interactive session, so if you're comfortable switching on your cameras, that would be great. But no worries if not. We will be having 2 breakout conversations as well during this, so it'd be great to see that. I can see also we've got Deborah, long-time Purpose Collective member of the community. Great to have you back with us, Deborah. We've got Matt in Derby, recently read his Song of the Cell by Siddhartha Mukherjee, all about the impact of advanced therapies. Sounds interesting. Next up, 2000 Weeks. And Peter says hello. He's been reading Emotional Intelligence, classic by Daniel Goleman. Excellent. So keep the conversation going in the chat. Welcome everybody to the Purpose Collective. For those of you that have been here before, you'll be noticing that we're missing one of our core members. So Sarah sadly can't be with us today. So she's on retreat this week. So you just have to put up with me and Alberto, but you'll have to put up with us for a very short period of time because we've got Liam, who's amazing, who's going to spend lead most of the session. So my name is Chris Blackwell. Along with Alberto and Sarah, I'm one of the co-founders of the Purpose Collective. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alberto, who's going to introduce himself, and he'll introduce Liam as well.
That's me, based in The Hague, originally from Spain, but living with the Dutch people for the last 15 years. And I'm just going to start with a couple of questions, our usual questions for our guests at the Purpose Collective sessions. And the first one, Liam, is what when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Hello, everyone. This is an interesting question. I was thinking about this over the weekend while I was watching the coronation. You may know that we have a new king in the UK, and although I'm not a raving monarchist, being of Irish extraction, I did watch it from a sort of sociological point of view. And there's a flyover by the Red Arrows, who are the RAF sort of display team who do all the wonderful things in the sky. And that's what I wanted to be when I was a child. I wanted to be in the Red Arrows. And I had a big poster of them up on our little house where I grew up. But my ambition to fly with the Red Arrows was crushed when I was about 14 or 15, when I went to the opticians and they told me that I needed to wear glasses. So I never got into the sky and ended up doing something very different indeed. So red arrows.
Okay, maybe I don't know. This is a different question, but do you find any link between that and what you do now, for example?
I'm probably more the trainer of the people that fly the Red Arrows. So the people I mentor who are up there doing interesting things, who need a bit of guidance from a bit of a grey beard. Struggling to make the connection, but maybe it's that.
Very good, very good.
And sometimes I make a lot of noise.
That may be another connection as well. Okay, and the last question from me, Liam. Who is your purpose superhero or superheroine?
Could I have two? Again, I was thinking about this, and there's so many people who've inspired me and continued to do, but two have just, one has just very surprisingly is coming to see me today, who's passing through London. He's a Bangladeshi man called Shahidul Alam, ALAM. He's a photojournalist and human rights campaigner in Bangladesh, who the regime in Dhaka is trying to crush and has thrown everything at him, including 107 days unlawful detention and torture. But his ability to continue not only to campaign for human rights in Bangladesh and around the world and continue to do his amazing photography, but the way in the middle of all of that, he has kept his humanity and his compassion, despite all the beatings and everything that he's had is amazing. He's a huge hero of mine and inspiration. And then a bit closer to home, there's a man called Maf Potts, MAFFPOTTS, who is a well-known figure in the homelessness world in the UK, in the housing world. He used to run the government's, under Tony Blair, he had a £100 million fund to upgrade all the single homeless shelters around the country. He organised a big thing in the Millennium Dome. He's run Everett Housing Associations, he ran the Salvation Army, but he decided that homeless people weren't getting what they needed through all of they were being pathologized, and what they needed was love and solidarity. And so he literally went and sat outside an abandoned shop on a high street in Blackpool in the northwest of England, which is quite an impoverished thing, and put a sign up saying, if you're lonely and in need, come and talk to me and we'll have a cup of tea. And that's now grown into this global movement called Camarados.org. I encourage you to have a look at it. And they have some great slogans like, we don't fix people, we just walk alongside people. And also he's got a badge, which I wear with pride, which is, we're all a bit shit sometimes. And the answer to each other's problems is ourselves. So very different, doing very different work to Shahidul, but equally inspiring to me as a purpose-led leader.
Thank you very much, Liam, for sharing. And then the session is all yours. So looking forward to get inspired by you.
Okay, well, it's really great to be here, and Chris, thank you for reading the book and reaching out to me. So the book began in lockdown in COVID, where I was spending, because I had a lot of time on my hands, I was spending a lot of time online with people I had already been mentoring, and other people, leaders, entrepreneurs who got in touch with me, who just sometimes just wanted to have a weep about watching their businesses being destroyed or had particular challenges. I thought, well, maybe I should start writing some of this advice that that I give. So that's how the book started. And I didn't want to write a book that was particularly inspiring. I think inspiration only gets you so far. What I wanted to do was to write a book that was useful to people, and then when people read it, they would say they would recognize their own struggles in it. So it's structured around 2 parts. One is called So You Want to Save the World, which looks at what our motivations are, what purpose is. And the second part of the book is called Staying Alive, which is how to deal with the immense amount of challenges that come at you when you want to use your leadership to change the world, whether that's your own business or you're in someone else's company or you work in a multinational. And so that's what I did. I also, it's very short. And again, it was written deliberately to be short because I think many leadership books are too long. And I don't think everyone reads them all the way to the back. I don't know if people are like me, you buy a big, thick, or you have a look at a big, thick leadership book. I look in the back to see if I'm in the index. If I'm not, I might have a look at it. And I think if you can't say it in a couple of 100 pages, you're never going to say it. So it's short, punchy, and to the point, and that's why I wrote it, and it was published in January, and the response has been really encouraging. The main thing being that it gets into the hands of people who recognize their own struggles, and it's useful to them. And one of the chapters in the Staying Alive section is on loneliness and mental health. And it's only relatively recently, I think, that we've started being honest with ourselves and with those that we work with about how bloody hard it is to choose to put a social purpose at the heart of your work, whether that's in a leadership role in someone else's company or in a business that you've started yourself. We've had the sort of the cult of the heroic, legendary individual social entrepreneur who not only is a brilliant business person, but also can change the world and is a great communicator and never gets down. And I think that has been very damaging for lots of certainly the entrepreneurs that I have worked with. So I wanted to write a chapter that was really honest about the loneliness and the mental health challenges that I personally faced in the leadership roles that I have had, and then bring it to life through some of the people that have mentored and am mentoring. So obviously, I encourage the book. I encourage you to buy the book and let me know what you think. So we've got 2 little sessions of conversation here. So I want to start talking about loneliness, and I'll get into it through a story of someone who, after the COVID lockdown, approached me for mentoring. He's called Robin in the book, and he works for a pretty successful, what was then a pretty successful design agency in London that had a very strong commitment to social innovation and using their skill set, which is amazing, to make the world a better place. And he's a very introverted guy, liked sitting in front of his screen designing things. And his business partner, through no fault of his own, or Robin's own, told him that she was leaving. And he was then faced with the challenge, do I take this business over and become a CEO or what? And he was referred to me by a mutual friend. And that's what we worked on, was should he make this decision or not? And I worked with him a lot on thinking about the numbers of the business, building a board, how he might attract the talent and investment that he needed. And so he decided to be the CEO, and he got cracking. And then one night he texted me this text: Liam, you've been dead helpful, but you should have warned me about the loneliness, mate. That's the hardest bit of this for me. And so I think, like a lot of people who step into a pressurized leadership role, often when they've come from number 1 to number 2, is they underestimate the stress and the challenge that there will be when they step into that role, particularly if it's not just about making money and producing great products and services, it's also got a strong social agenda. And Robin experienced that in very, very acutely. So and I continue to work with him, and we work a lot on that. And how do you, when people have so many expectations of you, and you have so many expectations of yourself in a very challenging environment? I don't know what it's like in your countries, but it's hard in this country at the moment to run a business. How do you deal with that loneliness? I put in the book this mock job advert. If job adverts were honest, wanted chief executive officer. This company offers a competitive salary and generous pension scheme. We have ambitious plans for growth. We have a commitment to diversity and inclusion. We might even get a woman of color on our board one day. You'll often feel intensely lonely and exposed in this job and overwhelmed by the scale of the challenges, especially if this is your first time. Keep it to yourself though. And that advert has had so many people get in touch with me who are CEOs, saying that that is their experience, is that feeling this intense pressure, sense of loneliness and isolation. And I pretty much experienced that in all of the people that I work with. And one of the things I try to do in my speaking, in my writing, in my mentoring is get this out into the open and be honest when we're talking about it. So that's the first question for us to discuss. Have you experienced loneliness in your leadership?
Welcome back, Phil. I think we're just waiting. There's about, I think everybody will back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so everybody. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you all had good conversations in your chat rooms. I'm going to hand back to Liam, but Liam, should we get people maybe to share in the chat what came out of the conversations? Would that be useful?
Please. Yeah, I had a very interesting chat with two of the group, and one of the examples that was given is someone who's involved in a disciplinary process, which is time-consuming and hard and not very inspiring, but is the kind of stuff that needs to be done in order to get the organization, fit for purpose. And I think that's again something that I see a lot in, particularly in first-time CEOs and people in their first senior leadership position, is they go in thinking, I'm going to change the world and I'm going to reinvent the way in which homeless people are treated on the streets of London, and then suddenly find themselves dealing with a lot of internal crap inside the organization, and the sort of dissonance that comes with that, and then trying to live in that space where you have to deal with the disciplinary hearings, the managing the cash flow, the dealing with an obstreperous board, all of those sorts of things, which are absolutely crucial to you getting the culture and the organization you want to achieve the social purpose that you want in the world. Everyone I mentor in a senior position is experiencing that right now, particularly as costs are going up and all of the stuff that we know about.
All the challenges, really interesting. And I can recognize that a little bit from my own experience as well. I wonder if anybody wants to share maybe any of their observations or views in the chat. So Raria, do you wanna?
Can I speak, or would you rather I write?
Yeah, you can speak.
Please do.
Hi. Thanks, Liam, for sharing with us up till now. I really like what you've talked about. And in our group discussion, we sort of both agreed that often an environment that does not encourage transparency or does not encourage you to show vulnerability can make you feel lonely. And sometimes the decision is either to stay and maybe change the environment, or indeed to leave it and seek an environment that more matches your values and your way of being. So that's really what we've talked about in our group.
Yeah, I think that's very, very interesting. A lot of the people that approach me for mentoring are sort of going into a sort of process of transition, either inside the organization or asking the question, should I leave? It's relatively straightforward if you're a salaried employee in someone else's organization. If it's your own organization, and I found a lot of social entrepreneurs rush or too quickly move into creating a particular vehicle in order to achieve their purpose, might do it in their sort of 20s or early 30s and live to regret it, and haven't thought about enough how they will exit from that once it's not something that meets their needs, or they're not the right person to lead it, and that can lead to intense isolation and loneliness, and the mental health challenges that we're going to come on to. I think it's also, despite all of the great advances there have been in encouraging senior leaders to be honest about how they're really feeling, I still think above a certain level of seniority, it's still the kiss of death in most organizations to acknowledge that you're not feeling great, or you're feeling lonely, or you're not feeling up to the challenge. I interviewed someone for the book for this chapter who swore me to keep them anonymous. He works for a very well-known media business, and he said, we've got great processes and policies and support networks for people who work in the organization, but if I was to, on the exco level, actually to say I'm feeling lonely or isolated, my career would be over. I'd be sidelined very, very quickly. So I think we still have a long way to go in enabling people to be honest about how they're really feeling.
Can I interject this question too? Liam, like thinking about marginalized and, women of color that have not been in leadership positions that are now obviously taking over the world in many ways. I hear a gendered approach as well, because there's a certain loneliness I think I've noticed. I'm going to say a gendered comment in men, and the absence of friendships that are sort of based on vulnerability. Sweeping general statement, obviously, guys, I know it doesn't apply to everyone. And then women, and the fact that we typically have to surround ourselves with community because we have to raise kids, or we have to, build communities, et cetera, in a different way. Are you taking a gendered approach to this at all? Or are you taking generally a general approach to the idea of isolation and loneliness?
No, I think, well, if by gendered approach, Deborah, you mean that if I'm mentoring, and I say probably 60% of the people I mentor are women, there are lots of different things. It's, the added isolation and sense of I can't get to what I want to really be doing in this leadership role because of childcare, and as well as because of the sexism, and there's a whole chapter in the book on this. It is very, very strong. And actually, several of the women that I mentor, both who are senior leaders in well-known brands and also in their own businesses, have chosen me as a sort of old white bloke who understands often how these structures work inside organizations to belittle and keep women down in order to help strategize ways in which they can do that. But there's no doubt about it, the women that I mentor, there's a whole other bunch of stuff that they need to deal with that adds to this sense of isolation and loneliness, and just harder, particularly when they get onto the exco, onto the board, where they are 9 times out of 10. I think it's a bit different in the social enterprise world, but certainly in mainstream business, to call it that, where they will always be in a minority.
It will be interesting to review that part of your book. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, thank you.
And we got an interesting comment from Phil as well, Phil Cartwright. Phil, I don't know if you want to, if you're happy.
No, it's just from the Mind website.
Hi, Phil.
Hello. No, it was just a quote from the Mind website, an article from 2019.
Yeah. And so Phil's, it's a difference between feeling alone and feeling lonely, and how you can feel lonely in a crowd full of people, but quite peaceful and content when alone.
No, I think that's, and I talk about in the book an example from my own experience. I used to work for 4 years at Jamie Oliver, ran a big chunk of his world, including the 15 brand, which was a restaurant that took on lots of young people from, prison and homelessness and so on. And I talk about in the book about, we had a 5th anniversary party at a massive nightclub in London Bridge. And if you had been looking from the outside in, you would have thought, God, this guy Liam's got the best job in the world. There we have like hundreds, but the Prime Minister was there. We had anyone who's anyone in hospitality, lots of celebrities, all of the young people, Jamie jumping out of a cake. And I was just surrounded by people. It was an amazing event, which I was emceeing, but I had never felt so alone, and never felt, and it was in that moment that I decided that I needed to leave. So that's a point really, really well made. And I do think for the leaders who have a strong social purpose, who have set this organization up in order to tackle homelessness or loneliness, or they're women's refuges, or they're very stuck into net zero and those sorts of things. That drivenness to bring about that change in the world, coupled with the sort of everyday, the stuff we've talked about here, the really dull but important crap that comes with running any organization, I think can add to that sense of loneliness, particularly when people are looking to you to be upbeat and the leader and the inspirational social entrepreneur who's going to solve homelessness, when you might actually be feeling like shit, and feel that you can't talk to anybody about that. And the people who I mentor, when I ask them, what is it that you like about mentoring with me? I would love them to say your wisdom, Liam, your insights, your sense of humor. What they usually say is just having somewhere to come where I can just be honest about how I am really feeling in the middle of all of this is so important. And that's why I'm such a fan of coaching and mentoring and people creating the support for themselves. Maybe that's a good moment to move on to the second bit. Is about the mental health, because I talk in the book about a woman who ran a social enterprise in Brixton, Michelle Morgan. And again, I strongly encourage you to buy her book called Own Your Awkward. And she writes incredibly honestly about how her social enterprise and her wanting to support young people in London did her head in. I mean, she writes very movingly about the breakdown that she had. And partly it was to do with all sorts of other stuff going on her life. But a big part of it was this sense of obligation, this sense of not only I need to support the young people who come through the doors of our organization, but all young people. And I met her when I was investing in her business. I'm involved in an impact fund called Impact Ventures UK. And I didn't notice any of it, God forgive me, and she was the one on the front negotiating with us, and we invested several million in the business. And at the end of that, that's when she started having, a pretty real challenge with her mental health, exacerbated by this, I should not be feeling like this. And I feel a bit guilty about feeling like this when there's so many young people suffering. And I hear this a lot in the people that I mentor, particularly those running social enterprises, that my own feelings, my own mental health are kind of nothing compared to what a rough sleeper is feeling. Therefore, I'm not going to give that any priority. And my message to those people I mentor is, look, how useful will you be if you don't deal with this? And if you want to change the world, it's cliched, but you need to manifest and just demonstrate what it looks like to be in a changed world. And if you are run down, you're not sleeping, you're anxious, you're drinking too much, you might be smoking a bit too much weed, all of that sort of stuff, and things worse, it is intimately linked with your desire to achieve the change in the world that you want to. And one of the people that I interviewed from the book, and I highly recommend his research to you, is a man called Henry Majed, M-A-J-E-D, who's at Oxford University. And he's also the founder of a really good business called mymind.co.uk, mind with a Y. And he's carrying out some really fascinating research into the mental health of purpose-driven and sustainability practitioners. So they've interviewed loads of people involved in big businesses as well as social enterprises and so on. And this is the quote that he gave me for the book. And before we go into I'll just end with this before we go into the questions. The desire to create a positive impact can be overwhelming in the current global climate. An endless cycle of negative environmental news, reports of inequality and conflict can result in feeling helpless, a sense of always more to do, and our own unforgiving expectations become overwhelming. And I think he's put his finger on something there. And I think one of the things we need to do in our movement of those who want to change the world through business is to really support one another, to have high expectations and ambitions, but not allow us to overwhelm us. I mentor someone who's very senior in sustainability in a big financial services business, and I sent her this, and she talked about, you know, you have this huge visibility now because lots of businesses are taking the SDGs and sustainability and social change seriously. So more and more she's being asked to do more and more work when things are getting worse and worse, and it's harder and harder to make that stick inside the business. And I think all of that can be very undermining of happiness and mental health. And so, you know, in the people I mentor, in all of the boards I sit on, all of the CEOs particularly I have contact with, I always prioritize that with them, because unless people are in touch with all of that, they're just going to do damage to themselves, but they're also not going to achieve what they want, and the business will underperform. So the question that I'd like you to have a look at now is, how do you take care of your mental health? And I'm really looking for some really good top tips of practical things that you guys do in order to make sure that you can, to the extent that is possible, when you turn up to affect the social change that you want, that the best of you turns up.
Right, yeah, I think we're all back. We have about 5 minutes left, so I think we've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes, Liam, to sort of pull it to a close. So how do we want to do it? Do you want to get people to put in the chat there any practical tips that they shared in their groups?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I've taken a great phrase from Leela in the discussion that we had. We were talking about how, if you're involved in some really complicated, challenging, emotive social issues like homelessness or violence against women or whatever it might be, how do you not get so drawn into that it sort of disables your performance? And Leela talked about the phrase about you can't walk through water without getting your feet wet. Leela, do you want to say a bit about that? I found that really helpful.
Yeah, so it's just the idea that it's vicarious trauma, really, that you're taking on the life of another, really, when you're helping them, and working out how that is happening to you. And then you can put up some defenses against it and still keep your purpose and your meaning in what you're doing for them, rather than living their lives with them.
Yeah, really helpful. I was terrible at that. When I first started mentoring, I sort of become people's dad, you know, and sort of take it all home with me. And it didn't help me, and it certainly didn't help them. So thanks, Leela.
Excellent. So we've got a comment from Deborah about meditation, all types of practicing. We got Rawia talked about listening to your body, which carries important and valuable messages. Alberta talks about going for a run in nature. I'm a big fan of a run. I go for one every Saturday morning.
And well done on the marathon you just did. Was it a marathon or half marathon?
A half marathon. Yeah, half marathon. I was saying to Alberta, I went out a bit too fast, so I found it quite a struggle for the last 10 kilometers.
There's some leadership imagery there that I'll let pass.
Yes.
By, but yeah, I think we all get it.
Yeah. So yeah, let's keep them coming in the chat. So, and we were talking with Barry just before everybody rejoined, who's talking about daily practice as well. So lots of good.
One of the things I found really helpful was I've kept a journal since I was 20. So that's a long time, and I encourage all the people I mentor to do some form of journal, even if it's not every day, to do something. I just find that writing it down. I've over the years picked up lots of techniques from other people. Sometimes I write in the third person. You know, Liam did a really interesting, a Zoom today with Chris's community. Sometimes I'll write letters to myself. Sometimes I'll write letters to. I particularly, if I really want to do damage to someone who's I'm in conflict with, writing them a letter, I just get it all out. Sort of helps to do that. So journaling is certainly something that has allowed me to deal with.
Wait. You mean write the letter and then tear it up and throw it away?
Yeah, no, yeah. Don't send it. That would be a career ending for many people. Write it in the journal. I think I reread my journal a lot when I was writing this book, and I was saying to Leela and Deborah in our breakout, that, you know, rereading. I've got adult kids, and I like going back to when I was their age to see what was going on for me with when they were children and so on. And I was properly depressed, I think, and stressed out when I had my first CEO role, drinking too much. There was a lot of talk in there about, you know, oh, I got a terrible hangover today, you know, this is like a Wednesday morning or something, you know. So I find it a very useful thing to look back on, see some development, but also to realize that what seems so important at the time, you know, like life and death, oh, I've forgotten all about that. That wasn't life and death, you know. And then the other thing is what a sanctimonious little twerp I was in my 20s. That's another big take from my journal. So maybe there's been a tiny little bit of development over the intervening decades.
Well, thank you very much, Liam. I think we're at time. We're going to try and take a quick photo. And so if everybody could show how you're feeling at the end of the session and your appreciation for Liam, and we'll try and capture it for posterity.
So we're gonna count to 3. So 1, 2, 3. Very good, very good. Thank you. And I'm gonna try to post quickly the link to the next session, and it's still in progress, all the description and all the information there, but the session is published, so you can register if you want. It's going to be on the 6th of June, 10, well, the same time, actually, 10 in the morning, UK, and the rest of Europe, 11, more or less, the rest of Europe. And basically, this is going to be a session with someone that I know, and he's the co-founder of one interesting organization here in The Hague, actually based in The Hague in the Netherlands, and it's called Young Digitals. And what they actually do, they help young people that drop from education. So they stop, you know, going to school, most of them, you know, middle school or high school, and they take them into a journey of training. They train them as a marketeers, and they actually help them get a job in marketing at a company. So very, very inspiring, very purpose-driven, and that's going to be on the 6th of June, and hopefully we see you all there. So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, Liam,
Thank
so
you,
much.
everybody. Thank you, Liam.
Real pleasure. Lovely to meet you all.
And everyone buys the book, okay?
Everyone buys the book. That's a given.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.